Hello, Keller Williams Associates. John Vandergent's here, MAPS coach. I'm here with my friend Roxane Webster, and we wanted to talk to you about what's going on right now. And we were on the MAPS coach call last Friday. We were having a conversation around the forbearance situation in our country right now. And Roxane made a couple of really astute comments on the call. I heard what she said. I was like, I got to ask this lady more questions. So I immediately messaged her. We started talking about this over the weekend, and what came out of that conversation, we both had the realization that we needed to make a video that was going to educate you agents on how to help your homeowners during this time, especially if they might be getting into a pretty sticky situation. Roxane is an expert in this area. It's something that she's done a lot of. Roxane, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be an expert in this area?
I've been in real estate for 20 some years, since Stuart was young, and had a nice little database business rocking along until 2006, when I saw the storm clouds on the horizon. And it occurred to me that either you had to get into bank-owned properties or you had to get into short sales. And since a bank-owned property business would leave me with two names in my database at the end of it, Fannie and Freddie, I thought that I should start delving into and learning about the short sale market. Also, because I knew that people who are in their homes now and are losing their homes in duress are going to want to get back into their homes. So I saw a secondary market opportunity there as well. And we did a bunch of them. We consumed market share and we helped a lot of people.
You guys made a lot of people make a lot of good decisions based on what you told me already.
Yeah.
And you guys have been a member of Gary's top mastermind since what year now?
2012, I think. Yeah.
So you guys are obviously one of the most. And the name of your team?
My home team, and we're in Denver, Colorado.
Denver, Colorado.
We've got a kind of unique team, 3 owners. Myself, I'm a MAPS coach, of course. Jake Ginger, who's also a BOLD coach, and then Keith Alba, who's a KW approved faculty. So we value education highly on our team.
Obviously. Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about the process. This was eye-opening for me, and I'm sure it's going to be for a lot of people that are seeing this. And you've actually built a mind map.
Yes, I have.
Around how the whole thing has the possibility of how it can flow. So why don't you show that to us, what you built here?
All right, I'm going to share my screen with y'all now. And this, I know, looks rather intimidating, but just when we look at the broad view of this, what we're seeking to get to with our clients, there are really 3 outcomes that we see here in green that have the least potential really bad consequences for them, depending upon how this thing plays out. But one thing that we do know is that you either have people right now who are in a stable employment situation or they're not in a stable employment situation.
Well, Roxane, let's just absolutely make sure that everybody understands exactly what forbearance means.
Yeah. The forbearance agreements, this is the agreements that people are entering into with their bank to delay or defer payments for the next few months. We're seeing these agreements taking several different forms, and they're very spooky to me. So I think that we should be having this conversation from the rooftops to anybody who will listen to it.
Yeah, the common myth, true or false, forbearance does not mean forgiveness.
It sure does not mean forgiveness. You still owe those funds. And the real scary part about this is what the terms of the forbearance repayment are going to be, right? And in this area, I'm seeing 4 basic models that I'm seeing as I'm reviewing these forbearance agreements for people. Okay. Can you read that, what we've got here in blue, or should I make it a little bit bigger?
I can see it. However, why don't you talk us through the process from the top? Because you've got some branch logic here, you've got some decision trees.
We do.
Right. So basically, you've started with, you have a COVID forbearance database. This is a group of people you've collected that are in this situation, right?
That's exactly right. And what these are going to split up into 2 groups immediately: people who are either employed or people who are unemployed or their employment is threatened. It's unstable, right?
Okay.
Let's start with the employed side first, because that's an easier conversation, right? What I want to be doing is having, in addition to these care calls, we've got such an opportunity right now. Unlike any other time I've ever been on the phone, people are seeking connection. And especially in our database, we already have a financial relationship with them. Whether or not we view ourselves as a financial advisor to them, they already do. They view us as that advisor. So when we're calling up and not just asking how they and their family are doing, but we're also asking how their finances are doing, that is a conversation that if you do it tactfully, they're going to be open to having, and they're going to be very appreciative that you had it. So when I'm talking with somebody, one of the first things that I look at and advise to them, I ask them if they have had, if they've already gotten into a forbearance agreement. Because if they're already in a forbearance agreement, they can't refinance and they can't get a HELOC. There's no option to liquefy any of those, any of that equity.
Let's pause there for a second. How important, that's a very important point. If you would just make it one more time. That if you're already in forbearance, a refi is off the table.
Off the table. HELOC is off the table, right? So us getting to these people before they make that decision and seeing whether or not they have stabilized their financial waters for the next 3 to 6 to 12 months, who knows how long this thing lasts, right? But what we do know is that you can't go from 3% unemployment to the type of unemployment we're at right now and expect that it's going to bounce back to that. So people, even if they're in an employed situation right now, everybody's world can change on a dime. Look at where we were 6 weeks ago, right? 8 weeks ago. So I want to be getting to a conversation where I'm asking them if they are in a good position, if they had to go to ground, if they've got adequate savings or reserves to last out 3, 6, 9 months, if their employment situation deteriorates. Okay,
so let's walk us through this side then. So let's say they're employed. You're going to talk to them about cash out, refinance reserves, see what they're, getting. We'll talk about how to have the conversation in a few moments.
And yet, John, I specifically advise a cash out refinance reserve, a cash out refinance, because I believe that the HELOCs are likely to get pulled, right? Okay. If you've got an existing loan through a HELOC, they can't call it due. They can't say you owe us $20,000, send it back to us all at once. But if you've got a $100,000 HELOC and you haven't drawn any of that equity from that HELOC loan, I'm quite certain that we'll see those HELOCs get pulled and contracted. We saw that same thing in 2007, 2008.
Okay, and then the next step, you say financial cancel. What are you talking about there?
Well, just like we have been learning in Shift, there are so many homeowners out there that aren't even aware that you can call up your cable provider and threaten to leave them if they don't put you on a better rate, that you can negotiate reduced interest on your credit cards. Some of the ideas that we have been discussing as an industry, or at least as our company, on how to reduce our expenses are conversations that we could be having into our database as well, which again starts establishing what I'm calling a financial intimacy that is going to serve us when we start getting into gnarlier conversations down the road, of which people are going to be deeply ashamed, right, as you'll see as we get into it.
Right.
So really what I'm hoping to do here is get at them if possible before they make that decision to do a forbearance agreement, because we need to make sure that they understand the terms of the repayment. And I'm seeing right now 4 basic models for repayment terms. The first one is awesome, right? They just say, okay, you missed 4 payments. We're going to tack those on the end of the loan. Fine. Who cares? Your loan is done in 2052 and a half rather than 2052. The other one that we're seeing is deferred payments that are spread out over some period of time, right? So if you miss 3 or 4 payments now, they'll say, all right, we're going to divide that over 6 months or 18 months, whatever that term is. And then your payment is increased slightly once you're back on your feet again. That's also pretty harmless as far as I'm considered. But the other 2 that we're seeing, one is the most common one I'm seeing right now that says there are no repayment terms at all. We'll figure this out later.
Right.
And we're seeing that particularly in the government-backed loans, the Fannie, the Freddie, FHA, and VA. They're, when I read these agreements, they're saying, oh, look, we don't want to, well, you know, one of the options would be repaying the entire amount all at once, or we can look at a loan modification, or we might look at spreading it out over some period of time or tacking it on the end of the loan, but they're not giving you any determined any actual terms. And if I learned anything in 07 and 08 and 09 is that attempting to get the bank to negotiate with you on any type of loan modification is seldom successful. I coached many clients on trying to get loan modifications. I had 2 battle axes who actually achieved it, and it took them each 2 years. 2 years where they were in constant threat of losing their home. So the fact that we're seeing, even from these government-backed loans, this mealy mouth, we'll figure this out later, makes me deeply nervous, because there are 2 universal banking rules above all else. Number 1 is the bank never loses, and number 2, the bank always wins. And unlike 07, 08, where all the houses were upside down, they know that most homeowners right now are likely to be in an equity position. So if they give you draconian terms, fine, go sell the house. It's not my problem, right?
And then this is what's really leading to that 4th option. You said you're seeing this pretty commonly right now too, right?
I'm seeing this a lot, where the deferred payments are going to be due in full at the end of the forbearance. So somebody who has had to seek relief from their lender because they can't make parent payments now, all of a sudden in 3 or 4 months, they're going to be not only due having to make their current mortgage payment, but pay the $10,000, $15,000 that they owe from the deferred payments. That scares the bejesus out of me.
And so this is where our folks could be set up to be in a very painful situation if we don't get this messaging out in front of them now.
That's exactly it. So them understanding what these terms are, right? Or what the threats are if they're getting into one that has not established those terms, allows us to get them into action now, preparing for that moment of repayment if it turns out to be one of these bad options. And as I see it, there's likely to be 2 directions that people go to pay off that forbearance if it is a worst case scenario, and they're required to do that balloon. One would be reserves from a refinance or savings, because we've given them that advice and they've got some money put aside. And the other one that we're going to see people turning to is retirement funds. And I get it if you've got some money in a 401k, and right now 401ks are, you know, there are no penalties for withdrawing them as a part of the CARE Act that we saw come through. A lot of people don't think that through, right? If you pull $15,000 from your retirement funds and you're 40, a well-invested, and of course you're disclaimer, you're going to have all these conversations with your own financial planners. But most of these retirement funds are going to double every some years, right? So if you're 40 years old, by the time you're 61 years old, that $15,000 would have turned into $240,000 in retirement funds. If you decide not to pull it out until you're 68, that would have been $480,000 in retirement funds for the sake of paying off a forbearance agreement right now. So us preparing people to have these conversations with their financial planners, with their CPAs, so that they're not just signing on the dotted line, they're in fact seeing what their potential risks are and preparing for the strategies to handle that, which becomes the first time that we may be planting on them the seed that if they're thinking about selling in the next 3 to 5 years, this is the time to do it.
Okay. And there's a couple of options. If they were to sell now, what might we advise them to do from there?
It depends upon their situation. What I'm doing right now is I'm selling my primary residence. I'm going to ground and renting for a month to 18 months, and then 6 to 18 months. And then my husband and I are going to buy back into a multi-unit that we can do as FHA at a vastly reduced price and get us one big step closer to our retirement. Or if you're looking at downsizing, you're in a position where you're liberating all of that equity that we've been building up over the past several years. You're putting some of it into a purchase, and then you've got the rest in reserves to contend with whatever the next year looks like for us all financially. So those are the conversations, and I'm just planting those seeds at this point. But you see, this is all part of the same conversation. Prepare now. Prepare now to make sure that you've got some reserves, you've got some money put aside, if there's no way, if you've already done that forbearance agreement, what are you doing to prepare for that repayment? Are you going to pull it out of your retirement funds? If so, know what the consequences are of that, or are you going to pull that from reserves, savings? Where are you going to get that money?
Okay. All right, talk us through the other side if the person is already unemployed.
Okay, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Here's the thing, of course, once somebody's unemployed, they can't get a refinance, right? So we've got a lot of people in this country who right now at this moment in time are house rich but cash poor. You look at how many, the average American, what is that horrible number that a $400 unexpected expense would throw their financial position into real instability? That goes for homeowners as well. So we've got a lot of people in this country who are sitting on incredible equity positions, but if they're unemployed, there's no way to liberate those funds because they can't refinance it, right? So again, we've got the same conversation here. We can't, without the option on the front end of pulling some money out of the house. They're not in a position where they can access this equity. So we can start building that financial intimacy in the conversation by, again, having the counseling conversation, how they can be reducing their expenses right now, and then making sure they understand the terms of the forbearance agreement they're either considering or that they have already entered into. Same thing that we saw on the other side of this mind map. But when we get to the prepare for repayment, if you're unemployed, a lot of these jobs aren't coming back, right? We don't know what our economy looks like. We don't know what our world looks like. That's my 15-year-old dog you hear clunking around the background here. So I see that when we have the conversation about preparing for repayment, we've got a few other things that we should start planting the seeds on, right? And John, what's important to keep in mind with this is not one conversation. You start vomiting all this information on somebody right now, they're going to run for the hills. Right. This is a series of conversations that we're having where we're coaching them and we're preparing them for these stages in this event for themselves. So when I look at preparing for repayment, if you're unemployed, again, we've got the retirement funds with the potential loss in that retirement account over time. Reserves or savings. Now we're adding a new one into the game, which is bankruptcy. If somebody owns a home as a primary residence, most states have homestead protection for your primary residence, which means that depending upon the type of bankruptcy, you may be allowed to stay in your property as long as you can continue making the mortgage payments. So now we're not just having them talk to a CPA, now we're having them talk to an attorney as well. Okay. Reserves or savings, which they may or may not have. And then, talk to mom. Is there somebody you can get a personal loan from? Because these amounts are not going to be huge, 3-4 months. But if you're unemployed, $10,000, $15,000 is big. And then this is the first time we're starting to have a really important conversation with them about selling. Right? And I think that a part of this situation that really spooks me, we saw this so much, John, during the Great Recession, is by the time people start getting to this position, they are deeply ashamed of the situation that they're in. Deeply ashamed. I can't tell you how many times I was sitting at a kitchen table having a conversation with a husband and a wife, and at that kitchen table, in that conversation with me, the stranger realtor, was the first time the wife learned that the husband had not made the mortgage payments in 6 months. Right? They're so ashamed they won't even share it with their spouses. right? So it is quite possible that we see people who get to this position who find themselves having this amount due. They're trying to look at, they don't know which of these options to look at. And what they start doing is hoping things will get better. They'll get that job, they'll get a bonus, a government program will come along. And then we see that person who's in an equity position who could have sold before going into default. They could have banked those proceeds. They could have downsized at that moment. They could have gone and rented until the market dipped like I'm about to. And they could have preserved their credit and bought back into this market at a better price. But because they're going to ground and they're ashamed to ask for help, instead they in fact go into default on their loan. Even with equity, you can go into default. Right? And the bank, the only thing they ever agreed to do was to take your house in foreclosure if you stopped paying the mortgage. Right?
Yeah, walk us through the steps in the purple there about what would happen even in an equity position if they didn't address the situation.
If they don't address it, it goes into default. You go through the foreclosure process. Each state has got a different one, but they've all got some version of a foreclosure sale. And that sale is set for the benefit of the bank, not for the homeowner. And what a lot of people don't know is that in those sales, it's the bank that sets that sales price, right? And of course, they're attempting to recoup their losses. So they're only going to set that price at a place that recoups them their losses and the back payments and whatever legal fees may be attached to it. Even though that house may be sitting on $200,000 in potential equity, the bank is likely going to be the one who sets that price. They're going to set it low enough that an investor will want to snap up on it. And then the homeowner gets whatever is left over, which is usually drastically reduced proceeds, and they've got destroyed credit, and they're going to have to rent for 3 to 5 years anyway to recover it and rebuild it before they can even think about buying back in, right?
Wow.
So we're looking at people, just this decision point right here, but what happens when that bill comes due? Do I go to ground? Or do I sell right now? That right there, that's a green outcome. It's profound.
So crazy to me that somebody can have a great equity position in their home and have this all happen to them if they didn't make the right moves.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Then the other options that we see, that's equity position. If they're not in an equity position, and we've all really gotten used to everybody having equity, but we all have folks who have bought in the last 1, 2, 3 years, who it won't take a huge dip in the values for them to be upside down. I don't think that it's going to be an insignificant dip in the values. I think we're going to see a profound dip in the values. Going to be for different reasons than we saw last time. Last time it was stupid lending practices and idiotic consumer behavior pulling all the money out of their house every year. But now we can have a profound housing impact because of unemployment. It doesn't always have to be an internal cause. Most of them aren't. Right?
Sure.
So if somebody's has no equity in their property, if they could sell it before going into default, if they're in a position to bring cash to the table. That again brings us to buy, beg, borrow, steal, see if you can pull some money from somewhere in order to bring that cash to the table. And that allows you to preserve your credit, rent until you're employed again, and buy back in at a reduced price. They might actually be in a better position than they were right now. Right? Because now they've got money in the bank. They've got that same, Gary's been saying $1 today is going to be worth $5 a year from now or 2 years from now. That person might be in a better position because they sold it at that point, even bringing some cash to the table. The other options, if they're upside down, one is to do a short sale. And I think something we all need to be aware of with short sales is this is true, what I'm about to say about foreclosures as well. If the bank doesn't recoup what they were owed, you as a homeowner still owe them that money, right? And they can file what's called a deficiency judgment and pursue payment of that. So in a lot of cases, those of us who really prided ourselves on doing great service for our clients in the short sale years really worked hard to make sure that we negotiated these in such a way that that deficiency was forgiven. That's what we're seeing here in the middle side, right? So the bank says, not only are we going to accept less than we're owed, but we're not going to pursue you for the difference. Here's the thing that most people don't think about though. Forgiven debt is viewed as earned income in the eyes of the IRS, right? So that can create an enormous tax problem, right? And what a lot of people are not aware is that taxes cannot be included in a bankruptcy. So you could even have to go to bankruptcy and still owe the IRS. The only reason doing short sales made sense with forgiven deficiencies in the recession was because Congress acted and had a temporary forgiveness of those tax debts. It was called the Mortgage Debt Forgiveness Act. And in order for that to happen this time, it will require congressional action. You're still going to have the destroyed credit. You're still going to have to rent for 3 to 5 years, rebuild the credit, and buy back in. But unlike 08, 07, it may well be that until we see such mortgage debt forgiveness come into place, we might be better serving our folks by not negotiating that forgiveness of the deficiency, because a deficiency judgment can be included in a bankruptcy. Right. So if at that point somebody's hit with a $200,000 or $100,000 deficiency, then they follow it up with the destroyed credit from the bankruptcy and renting and rebuilding credit. But at least they're not walking out of this thing with a horrible financial situation augmented by a big IRS problem. And then, of course, the third option is go to ground, put your head in the sand, and let the thing go to foreclosure, right? Same thing, deficiency judgment, bankruptcy, destroyed credit, the whole 9 yards. And what is really striking to me with this model, John, is how many decision points there are to get at only a few good outcomes here for these folks.
Again, we got to stress here how important urgency of this messaging is right now. This is
we got to have these conversations.
Our conversation of the weekend. It's like everybody in everybody's database should be hearing these messages now.
That's right.
So, speaking of that, so thanks for walking us through the process. Let's say that, the folks that are watching this video are getting the message. They're understanding the implications, the ramifications of not talking about this with the people that they care about, their homeowners.
Yeah.
So how do we start getting the message out? I mean, you put together a great 8x8 using a lot of video. Maybe you take a moment to show us a little bit about what you did there and how you're using it and how it's working for you.
Absolutely. I started out with just creating, literally I did these all in 15 minutes with my phone resting on my music stand a few weeks ago, right? And I just started doing a series of financial education. We've got one on assistance programs. Is pulling retirement funds a good idea? I've got one here with forbearance agreements. Well, this one's shorter. We don't all need to be watching all these, but we'll include some links so you can see them. But this is just a basic education video.
Yeah, Roxane, we're not getting audio on our side over here.
Oops. Sorry, well then we will just include these links. Like I need to see myself more on camera. My father used to say, get out of the spotlight, I smell burning ham.
Well, hang on just a second though.
Yeah.
Show us the rest of the titles though. These are great titles here. These are very thought-provoking titles.
Yep.
Just based on questions, right?
Assistance programs, pulling retirement funds. Is that a good idea? What's the difference between the Great Recession and now? Refinancing versus home equity, house rich, cash poor, pros and cons of forbearance agreements, how to cut household expenses, right? And we've got tons more of these coming out, and it's about us building that, continuing to build that financial intimacy, which I keep coming back to. You can see, right, one other thing to talk about this model. I hope I don't need to point out that you need to, when Gary has been talking in some of his addresses to us all how he's been talking about our need to have relationships, solidify relationships with attorneys and with CPAs and with financial planners. This is why. Right? At every one of these points that I'm talking with somebody, I need them to speak with a CPA. I need them to talk to a financial planner. I need them to talk to an attorney. I need them to have conversations. These conversations are way above our pay grade without help. So you need to be forging those relationships right now.
Okay.
Okay.
So let me ask you, so our folks understand the process. They maybe have built some videos, other types of information sources that would cause people to maybe pick up the phone and reach out and look for other. How do we actually facilitate that contact from collateral to now you're getting a phone call to talk to you? How have you done that in the past?
You know, I have just been very purposeful with the care calls. I think that the care calls, it's one thing to say, how you doing, touchy, all right, fine. I don't want to sound insensitive, but these have to be very purposeful, right? When I'm calling people, I'm having my very first care call, I'm very clear in my mind that I have a goal of determining whether or not they have adequate reserves, they can pull funds from their equity, and whether or not they have entered into a forbearance agreement, because this is going to tell me where the entrance point of this conversation is.
Got it. So you're using this as part of your care call scripting. Why don't you walk us through process and then we'll role play in just a moment. Okay. Is that okay?
Yes, absolutely. So I want them, every call I have, I'm treating it like a coaching call. It's a coaching call where I am informing them and then I'm giving them homework and then I'm setting the next call, right? Because this is all going to go down very quickly. We're talking about, 12 weeks before we see people facing these choices that we've just reviewed. So if we can be setting a care call with a homework assignment and call them back next week, how did that go? Did you have any questions? Do you want to do some script work on how to talk to that insurance company, right? We're now getting more and more intimate in these conversations with them. And something when we're talking about this that I thought maybe you could touch on a little bit is the difference between somebody who trusts us and somebody who's being transparent, right? I call it when we're doing our scripting, and we need to be thinking about this in all of our marketing pieces. We need to be doing 8x8s with the videos. We need to be taking versions of those and blasting them out to social media. We need to be sending various messages. If somebody bought within the last 3 years, that assumes that they may be upside down versus messages of people who may have equity. But when we were talking this weekend about how I often have these conversations in the third party with people, right? That I have a lot of clients who are worried about the next several months. Many folks aren't aware that they can negotiate it. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about friends they may have. Yeah. And why does that work, John?
Yeah, so that's actually interesting that you already knew what you were doing, and this is a sign of emotional intelligence. So just consider this, guys. If the idea is that if you're speaking to a homeowner that is experiencing shame, or fear or anger or any of the other negative emotions as a direct result of the situation that they're in. If we're going and asking them these types of questions that cause more of that negative emotion to come up, one way to work around that from a language and an emotional intelligence and a psychology standpoint, quite frankly, is to speak to things at the level of the third person. Roxane calls it the third party scripting. Some people would call this storytelling. An example might be something along the lines of, hey, listen, I was just thinking about somebody that I was helping out last week. And when we were speaking with him, he told us about his situation was X, Y, Z. And as a result, he made the decision to ABC. And here's how he benefited, 1, 2, 3. And even though we're talking about a third party, somebody that's not in the room, what the psychological effect on this is it actually bypasses what we call the critical faculty, which is the part of our conscious mind that homeowner would be saying, yeah, but that doesn't apply to me in this situation, and I'm going to get more angry. So if you have a deep rapport with people, and they're being open and they're being, for lack of a better word, vulnerable and transparent, you can speak directly to them, very sensitively, but directly to them. If your emotional intelligence is telling you that there's some defensiveness or maybe some other negative emotions that you feel like you might be poking the bear, use the storytelling mode, use the
That's
third
right.
party mode. Is that what you're talking about, Roxane?
That's exactly what I'm talking about. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And it works very, very well. It's interesting when we were looking for short sales, one of the best door knocking things we ever did was we'd go find a house that was not only in foreclosure, but was vacant with the weeds, the thistles. And we'd go do a 5x5x10 door knock. We'd knock 5 doors in each direction and 10 across the street. And what we were scripting to at that point was, hey, do you have any idea how to reach John? Because John may not know how many options he has right now. And the sooner he talks to me, the better off he's going to be. And I start listing all of these options for them, and I'd wait for them, the big eyes and the big ears, see who was really paying attention. And then I knew if we knew that probably 2 to 3 of the people I would be talking to there were in the same situation. And by speaking about John and what I could do for him and what his options were and what his threats were, it opened a conversation with them in a way that was non-threatening.
Very clever. All right. Well, keep us walking through. I can't wait to roll.
All right. Excellent. About the only thing that it's important is every single marketing piece you do, you need to make sure your general database 8x8, your vid campaign, but also every one of these pieces, every conversation you're having is that you feel an urgency and a public service imperative to have this conversation with any person who will open their ears and listen to you. And recruit your database to find their friends and their family, right? We're seeing the appointments that I'm doing right now are people who are sharing my emails with other people, right? Hey, Roxane, I really trust her. Listen to what she has to say. She's really smart. And then we say, that's going to be in our database. And then our database's database, which is our greatest opportunity. And then where better minds than mine are going to be, well, of course, we need to be thinking about how to do this on social media. We're posting these messages through Lead Accelerator. And this is going to be about mind share. And if we can get people, if we can be doing landing pages for people to come into off of social media ads. Right now, I'm working on the essential forbearance survival guide that all somebody has to do is click through to receive and see if we can be setting up these Zoom appointments. If you can get into, and this is really the most important part of this whole story right here, is that you are in such a position to help people. The 3 green colors here are the outcomes that don't have them with destroyed credit, right, out of all of these decision threads. But you're not going to even have the opportunity to have this conversation if you wait until they're already there. We have to have had this building, like that dating process of getting deeper and deeper into this financial discussion, being somebody who's bringing them resources and legal advice and tax advice and so forth, so that you've now earned the permission to have that intimate conversation at a moment where they really need it.
All right. Well, I think it'd be helpful if we went through the conversation as if I'm a homeowner and you're my realtor. Is that fair?
Sure.
Okay. And just set us up. How did I come to learn about you in this particular scenario we're going to play out?
In this situation, I am going to assume that you're a past client, right? Let's start with that, because these are the easiest conversations to have, and there's already a level of trust.
Okay. And would you like me to be the defensive or the non-defensive type?
Why don't you be the defensive type?
Perfect. I'm
Excellent.
good at that.
Oh, that's fantastic. Ring, ring. John, how are you?
Hello.
Hi, it's Roxane Webster, your realtor. I helped you buy your house 4 years ago. How are you doing, sir?
Hey, Roxane. How are you doing? I'm doing okay. I mean, times are a little crazy now, as I'm sure you understand, and we're doing all right.
All right, that's good to hear. This is quite a Twilight Zone episode we're all living through. How's it going working from home?
Yeah, so that's kind of a sensitive question right now. We have been furloughed, and look like we're going to continue to be furloughed for at least the next 3 months.
Oh boy, oh boy.
I understand myself, actually.
If you don't mind, may I ask, are you guys in a position to weather that?
You know, we have a little bit of savings. It's not really enough for us to make it through 3 months. We can probably make it 1 month. You know, I even feel a little weird talking about this with you, but I'm really glad you asked the question.
Okay, all right. Well, you didn't know me 12 years ago, but one of the things that I really spent a lot of time doing was talking to people in '07 and '08 about exactly these type of positions, and maybe with the goal of helping you perhaps come up with some strategies to shore up your financial situation for the next 3 to 6 to 12 months, depending upon how long this thing lasts. Are you open to that, John?
I mean, I think it's going to be all right. I mean, again, we're gonna be, you know, 1, maybe 2 months, we're gonna be fine. And we've been talking about other ways that we could like maybe make some money on the side while we're waiting for to get our jobs back. And you know, I think it's going to be okay.
That's excellent. Good, good, good. You know, a lot of, I was just speaking with another past client last week, and he was asking me about the forbearance agreement that he was looking at. And boy, I'm starting to see some spooky repayment plans coming out of these. Some where they're going to ask you to repay everything that you owed them all in one bunch at the end of this. And I was able to review that agreement with him and come up with some strategies for facing that moment when it comes. And I think that'll help him be in a much better position where if this does last longer than a couple of months, it'll reduce his overall stress.
Yeah, I mean, truthfully, that was one of the options we've been considering, is the forbearance option. We haven't, you know, pulled the trigger on that. You said the word spooky. I love that word. For us, it's downright scary because the one that we saw as a draft from our lender required us to pay back all of the forbearance months all at once when our payments resumed. And I just don't know how we would do that, to be honest.
Yeah, I learned long ago that there are two universal laws to the universe is regarding banking, John. One is that the bank never loses, and two is that the bank always wins.
Tell me about it.
Boy, I wish, like everybody else, that we'd had a little bit of notice. You're sitting in a beautiful equity position on your house. I know, I sold it to you. I wish that you'd had enough notice that perhaps you could have pulled some funds out of that with a refinance just to shore things up a little.
Well, we haven't done a forbearance yet.
Are you, but you're furloughed right now, right?
Yes.
All right, so it's probably worth having a conversation. We've got a mortgage, or Keller Mortgage has a no-fee loan that I'd love you to have a conversation. I'm not sure if the fact that you're furloughed would be a different status as far as qualification than would be if you were flat out unemployed. Can I have him give you a call just to discuss whether or not there are any options out there to pull some of that equity, stick it in the bank, and have that just to keep your nights a little bit less sleepless until we know the end game on this thing?
Walk me through what that would look like. What would be the point of me doing that?
The point of you doing that would be having more than a month of savings in case this thing lasted longer than a few months. And it also might put you in the position, if you can pull out a little bit of cash from that house, stick it in the bank, you might feel more comfortable in this moment about looking at a forbearance agreement because you know you're in a position to repay it when it comes due. Or you can use those funds to actually pay the mortgage. I think that having some liquidity right now is good counsel for everyone, because we don't know what this looks like.
Yeah, you know what? I am absolutely open to that conversation. That's not an option that we had considered. And whether we're furloughed or not, the other thing too that I heard is that our employer actually did get their PPP approved. So we might be going back onto active status as employees so that they can receive those funds too. That's what
that's great news. All right, well, let's start with that. And John, I care about you. I care about your family. I would like us to continue this conversation over the next several weeks. And I want you to feel free to contact me as a resource. I know this is a difficult conversation to have, but I've got a lot of experience in it. And I'd love to share that with you and see what we can do to give you the best and most stable outcome over the course of the next several months. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's okay. And you sound like you know what you're talking about. So I trust your judgment on this and we'll continue the conversation.
Excellent. Then I'm going to have my lender give you a call tomorrow or the next day, and then let's plan on meeting again next Tuesday night. We'll have another conversation and see if you've had any success on any of these various lines, and then we can discuss what your next steps might be.
Okay, sounds good, Roxane. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, how was that for you? Is that pretty typical?
Yeah, that's pretty typical. Yeah.
Good. Great
Even
job.
the reluctant ones are not all that reluctant once they, you know, that third party scripting, just, you're getting the message across to them without it feeling as threatening. You're not, I mean, I think of a no trespassing sign. When I see the no trespassing sign, I go to that third party.
Yeah, brilliant. Brilliant. Okay, so we talked about one more thing. I think probably one of the best things that we can touch on here in closing this video. This has been awesome service, and I'm really hoping people are really going to dig into this, because there's just so much content in here about ways to really, really help people at a deep level. I know you have a servant's heart. Every time that became apparent to me in your first conversation, you're talking about this, about really coming from contribution with this. I am curious that we were talking a little bit about a lot of the short sales that you did in 07 and 08 became integral parts, integral long-term relationships. You even mentioned something we were talking about, you're going to be selling to their grandkids. So
Absolutely.
Tell us about the impact of this kind of fiduciary service to your people and the impact on the relationships long-term.
Especially if the thing that's front of your mind right now above all other things is that good people is always good business. And if you're looking at how to dial this Rubik's Cube for the best outcome of that person, it doesn't matter if they're business right now. If you help somebody save their house, if you help somebody save their equity, if you help them advance their retirement plans, you're going to be working for their kids, their grandkids, their great-grandkids, all their cousins. The other thing, though, too, is what a lot of people don't know is that nice, rich database business I had going before the Great Recession. Again, I think I said it earlier, only 3 of those past clients lost their homes in foreclosure.
Uh-huh.
And that's because I started having these conversations with them in 2005 and 6. And I got them all refinanced onto fixed interest rates. We sold if they were going to need to sell in the next 3 to 5 years. They went to ground if they needed to go to ground. They solidified their financial positions so that when the storm hit, they were able to weather that storm. Those people are ours forever, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, is there anything that you would add that we didn't cover in our conversation?
No, I just make sure we're right now building our stable of resources to help people, because these are going to be important conversations and you can't do them alone. You're committing malpractice if you do.
Okay, and we're going to make sure the links to some of those videos get embedded in this video as well. And just thanks again for spending the time. Again, everyone, Roxane Webster, John Vandergent's MAPS coaches.
Thank you so much. Thank you, John.
Absolutely committed to you guys. Love you guys. And please take this information and let's move with a high sense of urgency about getting this out before people make mistakes or make decisions that they can't undo.
That's right. Excellent. Thank you so much, John.